Can you hear me? Good. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming. My name is Azadeh Yadullahi. I'm a senior scientist at Kite and director of Fiber. I want to welcome all of you who are here and also those who are online to this discussion about advancing adaptive fashion in Canada. Thank you for coming, and thank you to our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedule to be here with us. Thank you to our partners, Toronto Metropolitan University, for helping us present this event, and to our funders, the City of Toronto and FedDev Ontario. This is an incredibly important topic that touches the lives of 1/4 of Canadians who live with a disability. As some of you know, Fiber is an academic research platform in the field of textile-based wearable technologies, and adaptive fashion. Its mission is to make care accessible to people through design and technology, by designing and integrating smart garments across the healthcare system. We are thrilled to expand our activities and our impact today through the official launch of the Adaptive Fashion Alliance of Canada. Yee! This new initiative, seeded by Kite, Create, and Fiber, is a national organization that will help shape the future of adaptive fashion. I would like to welcome Helen Weston to come and share more about Adaptive Fashion Alliance of Canada. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm delighted to share a little bit more about something very close to our hearts here at Kite, the creation and launch of the Adaptive Fashion Alliance Canada, or AFAC. AFAC is the first initiative to be seeded and developed through Kite Create's program and supported by Fiber. It's new, it's ambitious, and it represents a national vision to make adaptive fashion accessible to all people living with disabilities, illnesses, and age-related challenges. Before I say a few words about its aims, and you can explore those in detail on AFAC's landing page, I want to tell you about how we got here, because the story is really what sets the whole initiative in motion. Over the past year, I've had the privilege of speaking with founders working in adaptive fashion, with educators, and with members of the disability community. Melissa from XY Zips, Sharika from Pump Pockets, Parisa from Trishan. These three ventures in our first Kite Creates Creators Circle cohort were incredibly honest about the realities they face. And what I heard again and again was this: adaptive fashion is needed, wanted, and deeply valued, and yet it is harder to build, harder to scale, and harder to be seen than mainstream fashion. Amazing products are being created, yet customers found them through word of mouth, hours of searching, or sometimes pure luck. And the question that echoed for me was, how can a sector with such clear demand remain so invisible? What started as a collective moan about the state of things slowly turned into a what if, and then one day, an aha moment. There were gaps everywhere, not because people weren't doing great work, but because everyone was working in isolation. And at Kite Creates, well, we love the gaps. We realized that if we wanted things to be different, we needed to start at the roots. And that meant the next generation of designers, ensuring they see adaptive fashion as a space where design talent is not only welcomed, but urgently needed. better connection across industries, fashion, healthcare, retail, manufacturing, a place where ventures and communities can find each other. This led to collaborations, including a very meaningful collaboration with Karen Bitterfini's TMU's Human-Centered Design Fashion students, linking students with adaptive ventures and researchers in smart textiles. The excitement in that room made it clear education and advocacy were natural starting points. But we also knew we needed guidance. We aren't the experts, the community is. So we brought together a volunteer steering group, and I want to thank them sincerely for believing in this idea even before it had a name. Andrea Worcester from Silverts on today's panel. Thank you, Andrea. Karen Bitterfini, our panel moderator, Susan Langdon, Laurie Belzac from the City of Toronto's Economic Development and Culture Office, Anthony Liu, and Dr. Anita Kaiser, who bring vital lived experience, and Izzy, whom you'll hear from shortly. Together, this group helped articulate ambitious yet essential impact areas for AFAC. Champion advocacy and awareness, which we are starting here today. Facilitate collaboration between healthcare, design, retail, and manufacturing. Enable knowledge sharing through an accessible national platform. Support best practice by highlighting design, research, and academic insights. Build capacity by working with fashion design programs to prepare future designers. Ensure accountability by tracking progress and reporting on real impact. AFAC is just beginning, but the vision is bold. So my call to action to you: we don't pretend to have all the answers. In fact, we know we won't succeed alone. But we believe AFAC can become a national movement, one that reshapes how fashion meets disability, how design meets dignity, and how innovation meets everyday life. So my invitation to everyone in this room is simple. Join us, partner with us, share your expertise, your lived experience, your networks, and your enthusiasm. The first, let's grow AFAC into the collaborative, nationally recognized initiative we know it can be. Thank you for listening. So some housekeeping just before I introduce our next speaker. We have a Menti code on our bottom of our slides. So those people online, please, if you have questions, use the Menti code rather than the YouTube channel. And those in the room, you can use the Menti code as well. We'll also obviously be taking questions after the panel discussion from the audience, and we hope you have plenty of them. So now I'd like to introduce Karen from Toronto Metropolitan University. Karen is Assistant Professor of Design, Technology and Diversity, and she's going to share our land and body acknowledgement today.
Hi, everyone. It's so funny. I'm usually up here giving a lecture and much more calm, but today I'm nervous. And as I tell my students, you should still be nervous, right? Because that means that you're passionate about something. So, but anyways, let's start. So I'd like to do the land acknowledgement. And today we acknowledge that the events and meetings we host take place on land traditionally inhabited and cared for by First Nations. Toronto is the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Toronto Metropolitan University, where I am employed, is working to rectify its relationship with its Indigenous peoples through its commitment to reconciliation. I acknowledge that more work needs to be done. In this space, education is a step in responsibility and mitigating harm. We must honor the sacred ancestral stewardship by challenging narratives, decolonizing our practices, and valuing Indigenous sovereignty. I want to take a moment as well to acknowledge the body. I've started doing this a couple years ago when I gave a lecture at Middlesex University, when I was talking about inclusive or expanded sizing as well. And I think it's really important. So each of us here arrives as a body, breathing, sensing, holding experiences, histories, abilities, limitations, and needs. It is through our bodies that we encounter the world and one another, through sight and sound, movement and stillness, comfort and discomfort. The body is what situates us here, together, in this shared space and time. And when I talk from a human-centered design context, and this matters really deeply. We do not design for abstract users or idealized minds. We design for embodied people. Every interaction, system, and environment we create is ultimately met by a body. Hands that touch, eyes that focus, nervous systems that respond, bodies that are clothed, feel, move, tire, and adapt. Taking a moment to recognize our own bodies helps us ground our work in empathy, presence, responsibility, reminding us that design always has a physical, emotional, and lived consequences. So I now have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker. Did you all know in this room that we actually have an industry icon? Did you know that? Yeah, we have an industry icon, like an award-winning industry icon, and I believe that just happened last week. Our keynote speaker just won the CAFCAD Industry Icon Award, so we're so happy. It's our pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Izzy Kamieri, recent recipient of the CAFCAD Industry Icon Award. Izzy is one of Canada's leading and celebrated fashion designers and a true pioneer in adaptive clothing. Her journey into accessibility fashion began in 2004 when she created a custom clothing for a wheelchair user. That experience opened her eyes to the immersed style for stylish, functional designed clothing designed for people with disabilities. With a career spanning more than, are you okay if I say this? Because some people, but it's good. It's 39 years, it's pretty amazing. Izzy has designed custom clothing for international clientele and created stunning collections featured in fashion magazines that we all know and love, from Vogue to InStyle. And I'm just so incredibly impressed that you also styled celebrities like Meryl Streep and David Bowie. Pretty incredible. And in 2009, Izzy shifted her focus to inclusive fashion, launching Izzy Adaptive, a brand dedicated to making well-fitted, stylish clothing accessible to everyone. So please join me in welcoming a visionary designer and leader in inclusive fashion, Izzy Kamieri.
Have a little step to stand on. Just so you can all see me, because I'm really short. Okay, some of what you said is a little bit in my talk, so I might repeat myself a little bit here. So hello. I thought I'd start out by giving you a bit of background on myself and work. I'm a Canadian fashion designer, as you now have learned, and I started my brand at the ripe age of 19. My work has become highly respected over and eventually appeared in major fashion publications next to the best brands in the world. I've also serviced the film industry with custom wardrobe in countless feature films, TV commercials, music videos. I've dressed A-list celebrities, such as Meryl Streep, David Bowie, Jason Momoa, and Angelina Jolie, just to name a few. In 2005, I got a phone call that would change the trajectory of my life and career. I was contacted by a woman named Barbara Turnbull, who was looking for a custom piece of clothing. She was a wheelchair user and needed this piece to work while seated in her chair. At that time, I never thought a piece of clothing wouldn't work for someone while they were sitting in a wheelchair. And like, why wouldn't it? I see people all the time wearing clothing while they're seated, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. Why would wearing clothing while seated in a wheelchair be a problem? Through working with Barb, my eyes were open to the challenges around clothing that people face while living with a physical disability. In 1982, Barb was the shooting victim of a convenience store robbery where she worked. She was 18 years old, shot in the back of the neck, and left for dead, while the robbers got $300 out of the till. Barb survived and became quadriplegic from the shooting, meaning she was completely paralyzed from where the bullet entered the back of her neck all the way down to her toes. She could only move her head and neck. The robbers were caught and got 15 years in jail. Barb, however, got a life sentence, living with the injuries that she sustained that night. I agreed to make this piece for her. Admittedly, I was a bit nervous. I'd never worked with someone with a disability or for someone who used a wheelchair. We discussed what this new custom piece needed to be from both a function and fashion perspective. I got to work on her new piece, and when it was completed, she was really happy with it. So after that, we began to make more pieces. It was an eye-opening experience, to say the least. I didn't realize that people living with a physical disability had different clothing needs than myself, or that clothing was either difficult or in some cases impossible to wear. Every time I'd seen someone with a disability, they were dressed. What I didn't realize is what it actually took to get dressed. You know what, I was seeing both of them here, so I wasn't sure where we were at. So okay, we're good. I began to see just how limited clothing choices were for someone like Barb. I came to understand that many people with disabilities often wore loose-fitting clothing, sometimes a size or two larger, because they were easier to get on, and that many needed others to dress them. Until that point, I had never thought about it. For Barb, clothing had to be carefully thought through. Clothing was a challenge, a struggle, and a disappointment, when sometimes items were even not an option at all. The more I worked with Barb, the more educational, thought-provoking, and humbling it was. I became so much more respectful and compassionate for people that live with a physical disability. What Barb went through on a daily basis just to get through her day was extraordinary. Barb explained in an article she was interviewed for that when she was recovering in the hospital, she was told by her physical therapist that from now on, she needed to dress in clothes that were easy for her attendant to dress her in. When I read that, I thought to myself, she was told to make it easy for her attendant? This 18-year-old girl now had the daunting task to learn how to live her life all over again inside a paralyzed body, and you're suggesting to make it easy on the attendant? This was mind-blowing. To me, this was basically telling her that she needed to compromise on her clothing choices every day. If those choices are not the way you want to dress or express yourself, this could be very disappointing and depressing. This becomes a situation of loss of identity, dignity, independence, sense of self, and so much more. Early on, after becoming paralyzed, she had no coat options. Imagine going through cold winters without a warm coat. Her neighbor at the time had an idea of getting a big warm blanket, cutting a hole in the center so that she could put it on over her head easily and wear it like a cape. This loving and creative thought was appreciated, but not something that worked well with her chair given the size of the big blanket, or that Barb actually enjoyed wearing it as a teenager. One day it dawned on me that if Barb had all these issues with clothing, then there must be more people out there with the same issues. I started speaking to her about the possibility of doing a line of clothing specifically for people who used a wheelchair. I asked if she can help me put a focus group together with other wheelchair users she knew that so they can share their experiences around clothing. Without wanting to disappoint me, she really didn't think that what I wanted to create was actually possible, given the many different body types and conditions associated with disability. Lovingly, she humored me and agreed to host a little event at her home. At the meeting, 4 women were present, including Barb. They all talked freely about their clothing issues, their likes and their dislikes. Each woman had something different to say. Each had their own challenges. What worked for one person didn't work for another. What one person swore by, others would say wouldn't work for them. By the end of the night, my head was spinning with confusion, and I didn't think what I wanted to create would be possible for a majority of people, so I put the idea aside. At the meeting, there was a young, very fashionable woman named Carolyn. I need to go back a couple. Hold on, sorry. Missed a slide there. Hold on. Carolyn needed a warm winter coat. And Carolyn was, like I said, a very fashionable young woman. She had been recently injured doing the sport she loved and was paralyzed from the neck down, very similar to Barb's injury. I met with her, and together we designed a coat that had both the function and fashion she required. We went through runway images and started sketching out details until we came up with the perfect design. After a couple of fittings, I completed the coat, and it turned out great, and she looked awesome in it. It was super easy for her to get on and off, and it fit her style perfectly. About a week after receiving her new coat, Carolyn gave me a call to let me know that people were literally stopping her on the street, complimenting her on her new coat, and she just wanted to thank me once again. At that moment, I kind of froze. I realized I'd given her more than just a coat. I realized this piece was not only contributing to her sense of self, but also to her confidence, her pride, inclusion, and so much more. I felt this was the best compliment I'd ever received in my entire career. I was deeply moved. In the blink of an eye, it became clear to me how I could create a line of clothing that would work for the majority. I realized I needed to design from a seated perspective and incorporate ease of dressing into every piece. It seemed so simple, and it was the answer I'd been looking for. I realized that most wheelchair users have bodies just like mine, but they live most of their days in a seated position. My mind started racing with ideas, and I felt like I was going to explode. I began wondering what clothing was available specifically for wheelchair users. After my preliminary research, I found adaptive clothing for the elderly or for people living in long-term care facilities that felt more medical than stylish. Clothing that looked like it was meant for a much older demographic, not suited to the younger people I was currently meeting. With more research, I learned that at that time, so this was around 2008, that 84% of people who become paralyzed were between the ages of 18 and 34. So that was kind of mind-blowing too, and that's from car accidents and sports, between 18 and 34. As I continued to search online for what was out there, I found nothing that would serve a younger demographic. Nothing. I actually found this inspiring, and right then decided that I would design a line of clothes for people who used a wheelchair and to start with wardrobe basics. Create timeless pieces that we all need and use in our wardrobes. I was deeply motivated. I worked around the clock, and within 4 short weeks, my new adaptive collection was complete. The fact that I finished it so quickly was nothing short of a miracle. To create this groundbreaking 25-piece line, I had to break the mold and redefine patterns to work with this new body type, a seated frame. Then do the research to incorporate the functionality features. I got the collection photographed, hired a website designer. Sorry, you know what? I think I'm a little ahead of myself here. Sorry. I think my deck is not following my talk. Can I see, sorry. Oh, you know what? I think it's me. Sorry, it's me. I'm sorry. Yeah, we're good. No, it's okay. Yeah, I think seeing both of them are kind of mixing up a little bit, but that's okay. Okay. Sorry, I just kind of lost my train of thought. I'm really sorry, everybody. I think what happened is I took 2 pages when I was speaking. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I know. You know what? I think. Yeah, that's so bizarre. Hold on.
You're doing great. I will take this opportunity. Hi, Garrick in the back room here. I'm flagging our Menti code is on screen right now. So
You
I
know
am
what,
here
I
with the
think
mic. So after
did I see
Izzy's
that I
presentation,
had
we're happy to take
didn't
questions
talk
from the
about
floor, but also
after,
feel free to use Menti if that's
so-
your preferred, and we'll do our best to weave things into the conversation.
All right, I'm sorry. I think I jumped ahead. Okay. So I'm going to go back to when Carolyn called me, and it was the best, or it was the biggest compliment I'd received. So a couple of months later, she reached out for a second piece. And once again, we designed it together to ensure that it had the function and fashion she required. When this new piece was completed, I went to her place to deliver it. Once again, we nailed it, and she loved it. On my way home, I was beaming with excitement about her new piece. I was literally feeling and imagining the compliments she was going to receive. I could not stop smiling. As I was experiencing all these thoughts and emotions, I actually had an epiphany. In the blink of an eye, it became clear to me how I could create a line of clothing that would work for the majority. So I said all this already. So sorry I got mixed up. So now I'm going to go back to where I was. So to create this groundbreaking 25-piece line, I had to break the mold and redefine patterns to work for this new body type. A seated frame. Then do the research to incorporate the functionality features. I got the collection photographed, hired a website designer to create the site, and 2 weeks later, in June of 2009, I went live and Is Adaptive was born. It took 6 weeks from start to launch. This was not normal. In the fashion world, new collections usually take several months to create, minimally, with the help of many people to put it together. Like any new venture, it was difficult in the beginning. At that time, online stores were just starting to surface. Social media wasn't like it is today. Print was still a way to promote your product, but it was very, very expensive. Marketing and getting the word out there was our biggest challenge. Reaching potential customers was difficult, given how diverse and numerous, as well as fragmented physically disabling conditions are. Eventually, word did start to spread about what I was doing. The line was being called revolutionary, and that I was pioneering this new and untapped category. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would be revolutionizing anything or that I'd be called a pioneer. The definition of fashion changed for me, and my own methods were disrupted. I couldn't design these clothes the way I had for 25 years. I needed to rethink the process and begin designing from an entirely new and innovative silhouette. Specific cuts for a seated frame in pants, for example, that wouldn't cut into your gut or ride down at the back while seated is what needed to be considered. Full-length coats that you can put on and take off while seated. Imagine putting on a long winter coat while in a seated position. You'd end up with a big puddle of bulky fabric around your waist if you couldn't stand up to tuck it underneath you. The alternative is wearing short coats or jackets, but this option leaves your thighs exposed to the cold snow and wet rain. Adding closures, such as magnets for people with limited dexterity in their hands, allows for easier dressing. Details like that can make a huge difference for someone, enabling them to dress independently. My first 2 customers were living with a spinal cord injury. One day it hit me that there were so many people that I could serve that had other conditions like MS, CP, Parkinson's, ALS, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As time went on, one by one, people around the world started purchasing and wearing my pieces, thanks to our online store. My clients started sharing their experiences and gratitude. I've witnessed people brought to tears with this new offering now available to them. I had one woman who called to tell me that since her injury, she hadn't been able to wear a skirt. After she received one of our skirts, she'd worn it every day since she received it, and that it made her feel human again. It made her feel human. That left me speechless. That is true impact. A quote from Fazila: "When I look at myself in the mirror, I now look and feel sexy and sophisticated." Anthony, who's with us here today, says that this brand has changed his life and it's going to change the lives of millions of people around the world. Clothing affects our identity and empowerment regardless of who you are or what your personal or physical situation is. Who do we serve? People who want to feel good about themselves and the clothes they wear, as we all do. What brings them to us is their unique needs. They're students, professionals, parents, and spouses. They're athletes, lovers, fighters, people with goals and ambitions, as we all aspire to. In 2020, I took our adaptive seated pant to the next level. Often customers would ask me to create a seamless back pant because they're a major cause of pressure sores. Similar to bed sores that are common with the elderly, pressure sores are caused by pressure, moisture, and friction. For wheelchair users, it can affect the skin beneath our tailbone and sitting bones. The pressure can cause an internal infection and penetrate the skin, which could lead to blood poisoning and in serious cases can cause death. The back seam at the back of a pant is not easily eliminated because it's integral to how pants fit the body. It separates right and left and offers dimension between the back and front. When COVID first came down and the world stopped, I started thinking about this request. I went to my empty studio, which was very quiet, took out my seated pant pattern and I stared at it. I started to see how I could manipulate the pattern to create a seamless back. I started playing around with it, creating some samples, had people try them on, and finalize this new game-changing cut. So now we have the safest pants in town. I call them the Game Changer with Is Seamless technology, which has been patented and now available for license. Over the past few years, adaptive clothing is being recognized as a new category within the fashion industry. Major brands like Tommy Hilfiger, Nike, and Target are just a few companies who've started launching adaptive lines. Major publications such as Forbes, Vogue Business, The Washington Post, The Guardian, and many others have done articles which we've been included in. This work has been used in teaching materials in colleges and universities around the world and featured in major exhibitions, including a 6-month exhibit at the ROM here in Toronto in 2015 titled Fashion Follows Form, Designs for Sitting. In 2020, I also was asked to do a TED Talk on how I started Is Adaptive. Several major studies have been coming out about the adaptive clothing market. 15.6% of the world's population experience some form of disability. 917 million working age and aging people identify as disabled. Researchers are speculating that this category will reach 350 billion globally by 2028. The baby boomers are the largest population on the planet, representing 1 billion of the global population. Their net worth is said to be estimated at 100 to 120 trillion, and 1/4 of that population lives with a disability. With those incredible stats, many feel there's no financial potential in this category. But we're here to prove them wrong. For me and Is Adaptive, it's been next to impossible to find funding with most venture capital going towards tech and AI. I've knocked on countless doors in Canada, the US, and globally. Last summer, however, I was contacted by my longtime friend, Joshua Norris, the CEO of Silverts, an established and successful adaptive clothing and footwear company that focuses on serving the elderly, people living in long-term care, and living with a disability. He approached me to see if I and his adaptive would be interested in a partnership, join forces with our two strong adaptive brands which serve different demographics, and I agreed. In September of 2025, we began our partnership. Together with Silvert's strengths, dedicated and awesome team, as well as a strong commitment to serving in this category, we're leading adaptive clothing into the future. With our brands, Silverts and Is Adaptive, we continue to innovate and work on new and exciting features in our adaptive offerings. We're also working on an adaptive kids line set to launch next year that we are very, very excited about. Another initiative we're working on is something we've titled House of Adaptive, a consulting service for brands who want to learn more about adaptive clothing and help make their brands more inclusive. House of Adaptive will soon have a brick-and-mortar showroom here in Toronto to service both B2B and B2C clients. Buyers and customers can come see our offering and receive personal one-on-one service. The future is looking very promising for the adaptive market, helping to make the world more accessible, safer, and stylish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Izzy, for sharing your 39-year career history with us. Thank you. And we're so delighted that you were able to join us today. I'm just going to actually put this slide up, which was the House of Adaptive, so that you can all take a look at this, because I think it's a great slide. I know. And so check this out and keep an eye on what's coming up. So just to remind you about the Menti, if you want to click the QR code, if you want to ask questions online while the panel discussion is going ahead, please do. Garrick is going to be monitoring that and running around and taking questions from the audience as well. We just want to, before we have the panel come up and be introduced by Karen, we just want to see if there's any immediate questions in the room for Izzy, as this is a fantastic opportunity to hear about Izzy's career.
Show of hands. There is one in Menti, so failing anyone voicing a question now. We will have time during the panel, Izzy will be on that. Oh, I see a hand in the back, so just give me a moment so you get the mic.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I was just wondering if you have noticed any changes regarding fashion design instruction.
Like in schools? Well, definitely I'm getting contacted by a lot of colleges and universities that want to start introducing this or start teaching it. So definitely, like all the time I get asked about it.
And we'll take maybe one more after this and transition to the panel, and we'll have lots of time for more.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Ju Yan. So I'm the mature student in the social service worker program in George Brown. So I'm very impressed of the adaptive design, and it's very good news that it's for the people with the disability. But I have some questions like, how is it accessible to people who may not be able to afford it? Is there any grant from or donation from the government in that area? Because I know that some people can afford it, but people who may have the disability do not have they have a lot of issue like the unemployment, right? But I just want to know the accessibility to the people who may not be able to afford it. It's a very practical question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, there are government funding, a little bit of funding. I mean, I don't know too much about this end of it, but there's also insurance. If you've had an accident, there's allowances for clothing. A lot of times it isn't enough. We do our best. Like now that I'm with Silverts, we are able to reduce our clothing prices as much as we can within reason, because we are also a company and we need to profit so we can continue to do more. So, you know, and I think, you know, there are a lot of people that can't afford it, but there are a lot of people that can as well. There are people that are working and in the community and, you know, functioning well as well. But there's some that can, some that can't. But there's no grants, I would say, like that people get.
Last question before we turn to the panel conversation.
Thank you very much. My name is Mohammed. I have a question that will this solution will always be like a customized solution, or in the future, is there any plan to have a kind of generalized solution? Just for example, one kind of clothing for stroke patients, or one kind of clothing for some other patients. Is there any plan for that? Because if I believe that for customized way, there will always be a more time required, more
Yeah, and we
details
don't.
required.
Yeah.
yeah.
Silverts actually has a lot of products that service different conditions. A lot of what Is Adaptive does, we do specialize in a seated frame, but it helps for, you know, different situations that people may have. So yeah, and so yes to your question. There are different clothes that serve different needs, for sure. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to get to the panel. So Karen and the panelists, if you'd like to take your seats. And Karen, it's over to you now to moderate and introduce. Thank you.
Okay. Is this on? Hello, 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 hello. We're good? Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, Izzy, as well. That was a fantastic keynote address. I learned so much, taking a lot of notes as well. I might change up some of my questions if that's okay. Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce the panel today as well. So we know Izzy. Anthony is beside Izzy. Anthony is the founder of the Anthony Liu Foundation. Anthony is an advocate working to bridge the gap between disability community and industries that shape everyday life, including fashion. His work centers on lived experiences and pushes brand toward authentic inclusion. Let's give a round. Let's welcome Anthony. Do that. Okay. Beside Anthony is Andrea Worster, is that correct? Amazing. Representing Silverts, one of the most established adaptive apparel brands, Andrea brings a perspective on scaling adaptive fashion for diverse mobility and care needs while maintaining style and dignity. Thank you, Andrea. Let's give Andrea a round. Next, beside Andrea is Varun Shattuck. Correct? Amazing. Varun is the founder and executive director of Access to Success, a Toronto-based nonprofit on a mission to enable everyone. Driven by his own lived experiences with disabilities, Varun built ATS into a leading global innovation hub for accessibility startups that's now reaching 41 countries. Welcome, Varun. Now, we did have another panelist who, unfortunately, you know how weather and traffic goes getting into Toronto. So Melissa from XY Zips was not able to be here today. If you know anything about Melissa, please definitely check out the work that she's doing as well. It's absolutely fantastic. So Melissa, we're with you in the car back too. We understand. We understand. Okay, before I want to acknowledge, honestly, my position in this space too. I'm relatively new to this conversation, but I'm learning a lot. And I have learned a lot, and I'm still have a lot to go. So I've been deeply committed for many, many years in creating inclusive spaces and kind of facilitating these types of conversations where different lived experiences are centered, where diverse voices are heard, and where meaningful dialogue can actually happen. So I'm new to this specific industry, and this is the reason why we have these titans of industry and industry icons here as well today. So thank you once again for being here. So let's get into some questions. I want to start kind of about adaptive fashion in general, and this kind of be for all of you. When you hear the term now, adaptive fashion, like what does that mean today?
I have the mic.
Okay, go right ahead.
I'll begin, I guess. I don't want to go after Izzy, that's for sure. So adaptive fashion to me is clothing that is designed with the ability to get dressed easier, more comfortable, accessible, and safely. So essentially clothing that works with you, not clothing you have to work with, similar to Izzy's sentiments earlier. I think she spoke really well to that. Who wants the hot mic next?
Absolutely. Anybody else?
was passing it to you, but you put me. All right, so let me just put this into perspective a little bit. I'm definitely not a fashion guy. Now, if you ask my little sister-in-law, who's way more fashionable than I am, and you ask her, what does Varun know about fashion? She'll say, nada. I'm an accessibility innovation guy. That's what I know best. That's what I do. That's what I do on a day-to-day basis. I work with startups that are building innovations for people with disabilities. And a lot of that work, as Karen said, is informed by my own disabilities. I'm hard of hearing, so I'm using live captions on my phone right now, which is what I have here. And I have what's called Erb's palsy, which is a form of partial paralysis in my left arm. So I have had experiences where, let's say, clothing, I won't go so far as to say fashion. I have had experiences with clothing, but I've never used adaptive clothing. And I'm going to get into that later. But to your question, what does adaptive fashion mean and where does it fit in my world? Izzy mentioned the challenges around funding, because all the funding right now in accessibility and everywhere else is going into AI and tech and all that so-called exciting, sexy stuff. But the reality is that fashion is for everyone. Everyone needs it. Everyone uses it. I don't want to get too Miranda Priestley here, but we are all affected by it. So fashion, adaptive fashion for me is simply clothing, fashion that works for everyone.
Excellent. Anthony, you have a mic.
I'm kind of going to sound like a little bit of an echo here, and Andrea definitely stole my answer, but fashion, yeah, you should be able to get dressed without having to fight your clothes and move freely throughout your day without being afraid of tripping over it or getting caught in your wheels and then falling out of your wheelchair. If you really think about adaptive fashion, everybody uses adaptive fashion. I can only imagine how many of us have been to a seamstress when we bought something before. So whether it's for the seated frame or for the non-disabled body, everybody uses adaptive fashion in one form or another. So I think at the end of the day, adaptive fashion to me is just looking good and feeling good.
Amazing, thank you. If you could pass the mic to Izzy, I'm going to start, because you just spoke to adaptive fashion, of course, as well. But I wanted to ask because you've been in this industry and you've kind of, before it even became widely known and discussed, what do you think has changed in the industry the most since you've started?
Well, I think, like I said, more and more brands are coming out. More and more are realizing that this is an untapped market. It's a big market. I think it is kind of slow to grow, because there's a lot of education that has to happen for companies to be able to do it properly.
Right.
And there is a lot of companies sometimes doing it. They're just kind of ticking the boxes, but they're not really doing their homework. So that part's really important. But But yeah, so when I first started, I didn't think anybody was going to get into it, you know, like on a bigger scale. But now, you know, it's definitely growing.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anthony, if I could ask from an advocacy and lived experience perspective, where do you see the biggest gap between the fashion industry and the disability community?
The biggest gap, honestly, would be awareness. I think, like over the past few years, there's been a great push in just promoting accessible fashion and the disabled body, but there's still a huge gap when you see advertisements on TV, the billboards. The representation just really isn't there of all sorts of different types of bodies. And one of the really disheartening and sad things is social media. There's so many different types of fashion and people and influencers on social media that get away with all sorts of things. But as soon as a disabled influencer starts posting a swimsuit or something like this, things are getting flagged, and it's just kind of like, what the heck is this? And it's getting taken down for whether it's offensive or inappropriate, and it's just kind of like, what the heck? What's the disconnect here? Why can you be naked and I can't be naked? So that's definitely one of the bigger gaps that I see in the industry, and we know we're working with Izzy to get a sexy underwear model line going so we can promote some, you know, inclusive sexiness. But it's,
Love that.
yeah, that's one of the gaps that definitely need to be bridged, and just breaking down those perceptions that, you know, the disabled body is undesirable, which it completely is.
Absolutely. You know, we talk about this in our classes all the time in terms of how representation matters so deeply. So thank you for that. Varun, you work, as you mentioned, with your accessibility startups globally. Where does, again, adaptive fashion fit within the broader accessibility innovation ecosystem?
I think it's an exciting and growing part, as evidenced by everything that we are hearing today. I mean, we're seeing the amazing and learning about the amazing work that's happening at Izzy Adaptive and now with Silverts. I wish Melissa from XY Zips was here. She's one of the entrepreneurs that went through Access to Success, in addition to a couple of other groups as well. So we're definitely seeing a somewhat of an uptake in interest in that area. It's difficult, however. I think, as again, going back to just the funding landscape, there's definitely a lot of challenges. I will say, however, that there is a bit of an increase in knowledge and dissemination about the idea of inclusive design, about the idea that accessibility is not a disability problem. Accessibility is an everybody problem. And when you start with designing for accessibility, the so-called edge use cases, you have that opportunity to expand into more and more use cases, more and more areas, more and more industries, and that leads you to more customers, and let's face it, more money if you're building a company. So we saw that, for example, with the Nike Fly shoe. Does anyone here know about the Nike? And if you were in Karen's class, you don't get to say yes because you heard about it from me. But if you haven't heard about the Nike Fly shoe, it doesn't exist anymore. It was a very great idea, really well marketed, but nobody could buy it. The real idea was from a company called Kizik. Nike licensed that idea, that technology from Kizik. And Kizik is a shoe company that provides shoes where you can just slide your shoe right in. They didn't really design it for people with disabilities. They just wanted a hands-free shoe. And you know who loves it? My wife. She doesn't have any disabilities. She just likes the idea of a hands-free shoe, and they're good-looking shoes. But the reality is anyone with upper limb mobility limitations, anybody who has difficulty bending, whether because they are an older person or they are pregnant, anybody can use it. And that company is doing really, really well. So we are seeing an increase in those instances where there's companies coming out with solutions for those edge use cases, expanding to new markets, as well as the idea that you can actually do that deliberately instead of just as an accident and be successful.
Excellent, thank you. So I wanted to move into kind of more of like design and innovation and talk about a little bit about that. So Izzy, if I can ask you a question in terms of what misconceptions do you think, you talked about how there are different companies that are going into adaptive, which is fantastic. You said that there's some limitations there too. But what misconceptions do designers still have about adaptive fashion?
Well, I don't know if misconceptions. Well, like myself, I didn't even know there was a problem, right? So that I think was, the biggest hurdle for me is understanding the need and then what those needs are. I think that, a lot of people think that it's not a big enough market, so designers may not feel that they'd want to get into it. Or, as Anthony touched on, about like sex appeal, or like, thinking that people with disabilities can look as attractive as, a runway model, which is, a really stupid thing to like just think that way, So yeah, I think it's, it's about market size, it's about the model, it's about a lot of things that, or people just don't have an interest to pursue it.
Right. And when you yourself are designing as well, how do you balance aesthetics and function so that adaptive clothing feels like fashion?
Well, I think I start with the fashion and then make it adaptive. So Is Adaptive was really born on wardrobe basics because, I wanted to start from kind of the bottom in terms of building people's wardrobes. And so I just thought, what do we all have in our wardrobes? And I just started jotting down, even Googled, what are the 10 things people have in their wardrobe, just so I didn't miss anything. And then from that point, then I made them adaptive, but then also, you can take something and make it your own and style it, like instead of black jeans, you can buy instead of blue jeans, you can buy black jeans and make them really goth, or, you can style yourself any way you want, and you just need those core out pieces to build on. But I definitely start from fashion and then add the function.
I think what you just touched on in terms of being able to style yourself is really important too, in terms of being that individual, and everybody has their own preference, how they want to present themselves to the world. And if you don't even have those options, that is extremely, extremely disheartening.
Like the Barb story I told you about.
Yeah.
Like, I read that in an article that she was interviewed for. Actually, the Star did an article when I launched Is Adaptive, and they interviewed Barb, and Barb used to work for the Star. And so when I read that, I didn't know that before. It just blew my mind, you know, because basically it was just like, wear elastic waist pants, things that can pull up and pull down easily, and it's like just wearing track pants all day.
Right.
And if you're someone, and not to say there's nothing wrong with wearing track pants all day.
Sure.
But to be forced to wear them every day when maybe you don't want to wear them every day, or that's not you, like that can be really depressing. Absolutely. There was one time somebody came to my studio and she was a wheelchair user, and she apologized for how she looked because her attendant didn't let her wear what she wanted to wear, and she just, and her pants and her top kind of like didn't match. And honestly, I didn't even notice, but she just mentioned it. And that's another issue, like a whole other issue about sometimes caregivers will just grab what's easy, not what the person wants to wear. And that's abuse, and you can't even express yourself because we all, look how handsome Anthony looks. Yeah.
Exactly.
It is a great shirt. But it's our identity, right?
Right, absolutely.
Like, it's first impressions, and if you're all disheveled or you've got things that are too big because it's easier to get on, like, it's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Andrea, to you. Silverts designs for a wide range of mobility needs. How do you approach creating garments that work functionally while still maintaining style and dignity?
It's a great question. Thankfully now Izzy has joined our team, so we've been able to shake things up a little bit. You know, we are a 96-year-old Canadian brand, and we started designing adaptive clothing in the 70s. So our seamstresses were going out to the community and starting to serve in people's homes because folks were aging. And they discovered, oh, wow, they're having trouble getting their husband or their wife dressed. And so the open back, adaptive top, gown, and pants were born. Now, so I would answer this in almost like two buckets. One is our existing functionality being our open back styles that work for us. They're tried, true, trusted. So essentially what an open back style is if I need help getting dressed and I have, you know, sore shoulders and my mom's helping me get dressed, for example, she can put the garment on up my arms and snap it up in the back so I don't have to lift, twist, nothing has to go over my head. Same thing with the pants. So with our tried and true and trusted assistive dressing styles that we've had for decades, we start with that as our blueprint. So we go, okay, this is gonna be an open back top. And then we go to the fabrication. Izzy's been teaching me so much about fabric. Thank you, Izzy. But do we want to do cotton here? Breathability. It might make the garment a little bit more expensive. How do we want that to feel and perform and look? And then from there, we choose our colorways, our patterns, and make sure it is fashionable. And again, Izzy has been incredible to our team for this. And then the other bucket, so this is new technology or new adaptive that we're starting to embark on. We start with a problem, right? We start with a use case. So for example, briefs. So a lot of older adults, they go through lots of people, they go through a transition where continence is a new journey, right? And you may need help going to the bathroom. We all have to go to the bathroom. I talk about going to the bathroom all day long. And so how can we make the briefs easier, right? So what is that problem? For example, it's really difficult for me to, you know, lift up my bum and get my pants off my bottom. Okay, well, how can we make that different, right? How can we solve that? So we always start with defining that problem and understanding. And it is so critical to speak to your consumers. Speak to the disability community, learn, and hire them. Bring them on your team. We have a board of advisors consisting of some folks with disabilities, someone has ALS, a caregiver, an OT, and we talk to them, good, bad, and ugly, right? What's working? What's not working? How can we change this? Do you feel represented? Are we doing what's right? What can we do different, right? So it's always learning, always asking those questions. And as someone who doesn't have a disability, well, 1 in 4 of us does worldwide, right? And it's the largest minority in the world that any of us can join at any time. So we're working together to make our futures better, and that's through design.
Thank you so much for going through that process as well, because it is a process, it's a design process. You know, we talk about designers and creatives and they go through this, here's how you make a design, and sometimes we do it and it's so linear, and in this kind of situation that it's really circular as well, right? You need to come back, and you talked about prototyping as well, how many times that you had one specific garment that you had to prototype also. It's not just a linear thing that you have to kind of go back. I had a question that I was going to ask Melissa, and I'm wondering, Andrea, maybe if you can talk about this, and talking about fasteners as well.
Okay.
You know, it's overlooked in design, or we don't even think about that sometimes when we talk, but how can something as simple as a zipper or a magnet or anything like that change accessibility? Maybe this is for both you.
I was going to say, I'll probably defer to Izzy a lot on this one. It's not one size fits all also, right? And Izzy spoke to this beautifully in her keynote. Not everybody can wear magnetic buttons, right? We always have to be careful if you have, you know, don't wear this. But it can really change the game, right? Someone having zippers on their pants or hook and loop, Velcro, not Velcro, but hook and loop to make it easy easy access, right? Easy access for ADLs, activities of daily living, like going to the bathroom, showering, brushing your teeth even. I'll pass it to Izzy because I think she has much more authority here than I do.
So you just have to even just think about like dexterity. So what can you actually do or don't do? Or how can we make this garment easier to put on and take off? So, not using tiny little shirt buttons, making ones that are a little bit bigger, or using magnets. Having a zipper pull on a zipper. So again, if you can't grip, but you can stick your finger through a zipper pull, you can pull it up and down. Even just thinking of universally designed clothes, like how can we make it easier for everybody? So they are just easier to get on, more comfortable. So just, and even now there's magnets, zippers that have magnets at the bottom, so they just connect together. So just thinking of, and so it's easy to zip up. Because sometimes the harder part for anybody is just putting that, the one side into the other, right?
That's a universal experience. I'm so happy, Izzy, I'm so happy you mentioned universality, and that's been, mentioned a couple times up here. And that's the thing, like after wearing a magnetic button shirt or a magnetic button jacket, I'm like, why doesn't everything have this? I refuse to wear conventional buttons because they just, no.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's universal.
Anthony, you're shaking your head there a lot. Do you have anything to add to that?
I've gotten to try on almost everything Izzy's made, so it's a very interesting process because I don't need a lot of assistance getting dressed. I get dressed fairly well on my own, but those magnetic buttons, like when I'm doing up a dress shirt, like I struggle with these buttons. And, I have friends, whether they have autism or limited dexterity, can't do up their shirt. And when I put on that magnetic shirt, it was like, and it just went together, and you saved about 2 minutes. So if you're in a rush and always late, like I'm kind of am, it's one of those things that just help that process become that much quicker, that much easier. And if you have a caregiver with you, like, it's great. Izzy's clothes have changed my life, like my wedding suit. I use her clothes for everything, all my pictures and stuff. I get so many compliments on my stuff, and honestly, it's because of the way the clothes fit. And I honestly and really truly feel like if you look good, you feel good. And it gives me confidence to get up on stage and speak and go out into the community because Izzy alluded to it. I remember transitioning from all of my walking clothes, and this was early, mid 2000s, like 2010, and everything was super baggy. And it did not work for me at all, did not work for my skin. I had pressure sores immediately. You could literally see the imprints from buttons on my skin for hours after the fact, and then they would turn into a wound or whatever the case was. So working with Izzy definitely changed my life, and it's changed so many other people's lives as well too, so thank you.
You just hit something when you talked about ceremonial wedding dress. I worked in bridal industry for a number of years, and I don't think I ever had a client come in that had an accessibility issue. But it's making me think now that what if I did, and how would we be able to dress, and how important that ceremony is. And again, to be able to present yourself the way that you'd want to present. So even having that wedding suit must have been incredible. That's fantastic. That's really great. I saw Garrick. Yes, I saw Garrick somewhere.
Back on.
Yes.
There we go. Sorry to interrupt the flow, but I think this might be a good time to start weaving in some of the Menti questions because the last couple really started to highlight like design approaches, and I thought our panelists, offered some really interesting perspectives in terms of even how to frame the issue and really meet the needs of users. We have a couple of questions. There's clearly practitioners or students in the room just trying to drill a little deeper into. So I'm going to combine a couple. One is whether there's any guidance for folks in the audience on how to learn adaptive pattern making specifically, and then a related one on the use of tools. So for instance, are you using 3D modeling software or technologies to support adaptive fashion design? Over to whomever.
Well, there are, I don't think, not that I don't think, just going to the question about the pattern drafting. I honestly don't know specifically what's out there. I know that there have been books now being written and information is starting to be done and created for people to learn. I literally had to figure it out myself. And, I just kind of wrapped my head around what happens to our clothes when we sit down. Because what you may or may not know is clothing is designed for a standing frame. And so even like if you think of hanger appeal is another thing. So if you think of a coat hanging on a hanger, it looks lovely. And when we're standing in that winter coat, nice wool cashmere coat, it looks lovely. But when we go to sit down in it, it just doesn't work. And you end up unbuttoning everything or wearing a pair of jeans. Standing is great. You sit down and cuts into your gut, rides down at the back. So I had to think about these problems and then figure out a way to solve them. So that, for someone who is a pattern drafter, who may be asking these questions, just think about the problems and what to do. Release pressure, make the back higher. I did, change the pitch of the pants for being in a seated position all day long, and so that they look better when you're sitting, and when you stand in in the seated pants, they look really weird because they're just not meant for standing. And what was the second part of that question?
Use of digital technologies like Close 3D, for instance.
Yeah, I personally don't use any of that stuff. I'm a bit of a dinosaur, so I'm just catching up to all of that. I know that when I have looked into it, and wheelchair users was my specialty, getting like 3D images and stuff like that to be able to take measurements, it's challenging when you are in a wheelchair because it doesn't know what to capture. So I don't know if that's progressed since the last time I looked at it. But so I don't have any personal experience, but I just know about that.
Andrea?
Yeah, Izzy, you're not a dinosaur, you're a unicorn. Let's get that settled.
Okay.
Wait.
And reach out, ask questions, be curious, explore, and maybe this is something we'll take back to AFAC as some curriculum or something like that.
Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm not a designer, but I work in innovation, and a huge part of that in the world of accessibility innovation is co-design. And from that perspective of co-design, which everyone here also brought up, what I want everyone here to, I want to sort of encourage everyone here to think about is that fashion and adaptive fashion need not just be about the big moments. It's also, as you pointed out, activities for daily living. It's also about the everyday things. And I want to give you an example about that. 3, actually. One was with my Erb's palsy. I think I was about 10 years old by the time I learned how to tie my shoelaces, because it was just so frustrating with my limited upper limb dexterity that I would just fight with it. I hated the process of trying to learn it. And I would get bullied for wearing Velcro straps. So you know what? I would just go unlaced, like whatever, I don't care. If you work with a lot of older adults, they will tell you, let's say, especially when they start losing their hearing, they will never let you describe them as somebody with hearing loss. They will let alone call them as somebody with a disability. A lot of people with disabilities don't think of themselves as disabled. So they don't even think about going to the world of adaptive fashion. But the beauty of adaptive fashion and inclusive design is, I talked about the hands-free shoes, right? But the reality is that seamless T-shirts have become a luxury statement now. Tagless T-shirts were first a thing for people with sensory issues, and now, again, it's a matter of a luxury statement. I said there were 3 examples. I will give you a third one quickly. This is going to be very unexpected. I'm obsessed with snowboarding. I'm a snowboarder. Any other criminal snowboarders here? No, okay, just me. Figures. So when you're snowboarding or really doing any intense exercise, you need to wear active wear. And a lot of that active wear is form-fitting. So when I put on my base layer, it's form-fitting. And so when you put on form-fitting upper wear, usually it'll be sort of wrinkled and a little bit twisted on one of your shoulders. That always happens on this side for me because my right shoulder is so much bigger than my left shoulder. And I can't fix it. My left hand doesn't have enough strength for me to fix it. So I just deal with it. I just put up with it. It's literally uncomfortable while I'm snowboarding, and I'm like, whatever. It is what it is at this point. Then I put on my pants. It's the same thing. Snowboarding pants, they've got a specific style of a button, which is like, it's firm for a reason, but it's hard for me to use. I get blisters sometimes on the inside of my fingers trying to deal with it. Whatever. And then, because I'm old in the world of snowboarding, I gotta put on wrist guards. For my left arm, I'm fine. My right arm, 9 times out of 10, I can't even strap it in. It's just sort of hanging in there. Because I don't have that dexterity. And finally, when it's actually time to strap in, I strap in on my, I'm standing here, I strap in my right leg, fine, no problem. For my left leg, I go this way. It doesn't have to be this way. If you tie it back to all of those examples of seamless clothing, of tagless clothing, there's so much value left on the table by not designing for these use cases. When you design for this, there's so many things that you can do better just for everyone.
Absolutely.
Appreciate we're getting close to the end of our session before we break for networking.
No.
So I was thinking we take a couple questions
Yeah,
from the
absolutely.
floor. So I saw Elsie's hand and then up front. So Helen, will run that over to you.
Hello. That was really, inspiring. I wish they had a fashion design course when I was looking into design in colleges way back then. I have actually 2 questions. One of them is you mentioned, Izzy, you mentioned magnets. I'm just wondering, there are some individuals that have disabilities where they have implants, like, steel, in the back. Is there another, are there any other options, like, especially with the technology moving forward, right? I'm just curious about where the technology is going as far as, all those things that were making it easier for people to put on. My number 2 question is, in terms of textiles, obviously not everybody can afford to dry clean their clothes, and not all dry cleaners can do it well. I'm just wondering, in your research and all that, are there any materials like currently that are either being researched? I know that the ones that we've attended with Sifu, it's like a few years down the road, right? But I'm talking about like right now. What kind of material that you found best in your line of clothes, to make into clothing that would be easier for somebody can just throw them in without having to iron them because they're not able to.
Well, there's a lot of fabrics out there that
Breathable.
Yeah. I mean, again, the sky's the limit, really, with what is out there. Silverts also has a lot of clothes, like their fabrics are very easy to wash. A lot of their customers live in long-term care facilities where the clothing is actually even like practically boiled when it's washed. So, they're concerned with the fabric also being breathable, comfortable, durable. And at the same time, we are also mindful of the cost of the fabric. So because the cost of the fabric is going to also dictate the end cost to the consumer. So, for my line, I couldn't really get, fabrics that are like amazing because I could never really afford them. Because by the time it turns into a garment and priced accordingly, like it's unattainable, really. So I just try to make the best choices with the fabrics that I have to choose from. And then when it comes to your second question, I personally don't know much beyond like the magnets other than like snaps and Velcro or buttons. When I was on my own before I joined Silverts, my financial means were very limited. And still with Silverts, like we also have to be mindful, they're not like $100 million company or anything. So
Not yet.
not yet. So again, you know, it is about what is out there. I think that like we're not really in a position to develop to be developing closures and things like that. But I think because adaptive clothing is becoming more and more popular, that companies producing closures and things like that are being more innovative. And, you know, I'm sure soon we'll see more innovation as well.
We have a question from Liz up front.
Hi, I'm Liz. If you can tell, I'm a knitter. I do have a question, but first I'm going to address the pattern making because I'm actually wearing my own adaptive hand knit. And I'm a former teacher. So for the students out there, go to Ravelry.com, Ravelry.com. You need a membership. There's 9 to 10 million knitters, crocheters worldwide on there. Search for adaptive fashion. You can actually message people and see what other people are using and end up buying a lot of yarn by independent people and patterns. Anyway, so I'm a manual wheelchair user. I have these gorgeous, that I paid out of pocket, ergonomic hand rims. And they've got extra sticky bridge between the wheel and the rim. However, I found out the hard way that when it's -15, even my gorgeous gloves that I got from the UK, because I cannot find wheelchair gloves in Canada, stop working. And I was stuck. Now I'm ambulatory. I have the privilege, if I absolutely need to, of standing, but there's a cost, especially on ice, because I'm always dizzy. One of my neighbors saw me on the 7th floor when she was having a smoke, came downstairs and rescued me from the park. But I was stuck. And these are amazing, my full-fingered ones, but they don't have gel padding in them like these do. That's fine, I drop everything. Like my gel ones do. And they only come in black. And they're amazing. Global leather with one L, one word. They're absolutely amazing. They're wheelchair fashion. The summer ones have terry cloth, so when your nose is running and you're pushing, you can just, you know. My first pair lasted me from April till September without getting a hole. And I live in Yonge and Eglinton, which had lots of construction and holes and potholes and pushing and stuff going on. But what is being done about wheelchair gloves in Canada? Like, we're already stuck inside. I'm not going to vent about the snow. I'm going to vent about the snow. But my fingers freeze. And there's nothing, right? I'm using mountain biking gloves. But then what happens is my hand swells. You know, so I've been stuck at home. So, and it needs to look good.
Yeah,
right?
and you know what? Gloves are something that I always wanted to address. Again, just being a very small business, like it's, you know, one step at a time. And I have thought about doing gloves, but it's also like I don't have the means to produce gloves, and there's very limited companies in Canada that can. So then when you start looking at offshore, you're looking at minimums. And again, so just being the limited size I was up until, like, and I mean, I still am, like, but connecting with Silverts, we do have more means to look into more things. And so, like, gloves is something that I did think about. So I don't have an answer for you today, but maybe I will in the future.
Yeah. We have a couple of questions on this side.
I don't know who was first. Okay.
It's working perfect. Hi, good afternoon. At the beginning of the panel, EC, you mentioned briefly, and excuse my paraphrasing.
Mentioned what, sorry?
Excuse my paraphrasing. You briefly mentioned that, yeah, there are companies that are checking boxes, but
Yes.
there's still some homework that it's not being done. And I was just curious, could you be more specific about this homework that you wish companies would spend more time thinking about?
Well, I think from a practical perspective. So, you know, I've seen even like where they'll include a wheelchair user in a runway show showing off their collection, and let's say the model is wearing a bit of a fuller skirt, but that has the potential of getting caught in the wheel. So they're just not thinking practically. So they're you know, wanting to tick the box of, you know, hey, look, we're including people with disabilities, but they're not thinking about what they're actually getting that person to wear and if it's practical. So, or even like one time I saw this company that was doing adaptive clothing, but then they had back pockets on their jeans, and they were for seated clients. So, as Anthony can attest, back pockets can cause a pressure sore. And that, like, my dear friend Anthony has had like very serious issues with pressure sores. And like, you could hurt someone by the way you're designing a pair of pants. Like, they even had all this detail in the back, which, A, no one is gonna see. I mean, it's lovely to have there, but it serves no purpose other than to hurt someone. So that's the kind of education that they need. Like, they need to go out there and talk to people like Anthony and other wheelchair users here. And, you know, there's a big difference between the ability of someone who uses a manual chair to someone who uses a power chair. So understand how that differs and what makes them different, and how your clothing can serve either both or specifically a power chair user, which is usually someone, not all, but a lot of power chair users need a little bit extra help. They don't have the strength or the ability to propel themselves. So again, you know, there's so many things that they're just maybe not thinking of.
My name's Em, and I'm also doing a PhD in human-centered design right now at Queen's. And I'm curious about resources for emerging adaptive designers. Like, so all the creatives and designers in the room right now, I'm sure there's lots of us. Are there any key resources or things that haven't been mentioned today that you're like, oh, this is really important for the people in the creative space that are trying to, in even a really small way, make some sort of impact?
There is a woman who has put a series of seminars together, and I'm really sorry that I can't forget her name. I mean, I can't remember her name right now. There are more and more books being written, being published. I think you just have to Google it, like, to find
Can I
it.
go as far to suggest for our designers of the AFAC website, we have a resource section, and you start to list and share. So let's do that as a follow-up.
This will be our next project, I think.
There was a question over here.
And there's one at the back. Just want to get that one.
There's a couple, I don't know.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Delina. A pleasure to meet you all today. I really enjoyed this talk, first of all. Thank you so much. I find it very insightful, very critical, and it hits so near and dear to me, and I'll tell you why. I'm a student at OCAD University. I'm currently pursuing my master's in inclusive design. I'm also accessibility rep at my school. And for my thesis, I'm currently taking on the topic that I chose. How can we get more people with disabilities in the modeling industry, more specifically on the runway? And I'm actually doing my first fashion show this spring on campus. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. I did want to ask, what advice do you have for me taking this on? How can I best implement inclusive design practices and adapted fashion to my show? Any advice is welcome.
Congratulations, that's fantastic. Does anybody have any advice?
You go for it. I've been
Yeah,
talking.
I would say speak to your models. See what accessibility looks like to them, because what we're hearing, accessibility is very different to everybody, right? But if we're implementing these kind of conversations and these practices and policies, right, that's universal and it impacts everyone. Also, please reach out to us if we could be involved in any way. Let us know, and that's, you know, Silverts is and AFAC as well. And lastly, have you heard of Runway of Dreams in the US? You have? Yeah. I would reach out to them as well. I don't think there has been any shows in Canada, but they have quite a few chapters in the US. And why can't we bring it here? But yeah, I echo Karen's congratulations. That's excellent. Keep on it.
So guess what? It's 4 o'clock. We could continue. I know we could continue this conversation, obviously, but I think that's the whole point. Is that this is just the beginning of the conversation, and for you who had asked, what do we do next? This is only the first, hopefully, of many things that is to come. Our next event we're hoping to host is a symposium. So with that symposium, maybe some workshops, maybe some more smaller group kind of discussions. So this isn't the first and last. This is just the beginning. So thank you all to our panelists for coming here today and to speak and to talk about this really, really important, have this important conversation with all of us here. Thank you all to everybody who has joined us, everybody here in person and online. It was a pleasure hosting this and moderating this conversation. And thank you, of course, to Fiber and Kite, and thank you for the platform as well.
Adaptive Fashion Alliance website. Thank you. And that's better. And register your interest if you'd like to kind of partner with us, if you want to suggest workshops, if you want to suggest themes. As Karen said, we are planning a 2-day symposium, so fairly ambitious. You know, we like to, be ambitious. In the fall, in September, and that will be hosted at TMU. So watch out for information about that. And I'd also like to say that on Menti, if you go on Menti, you'll find that there's a survey that we've put the link to. If you could fill that in, it's provided by our funders, FedDev Ontario and the City of Toronto. And I must say that without those funders, these events that are put on free of charge would just not happen. So please help us, help our funders realize that these types of events are critical to our communities. We'll also be following up with an email to you all to kind of remind you to do the survey. So apologies for that in advance, but please fill it in. So I'd love to, as Karen said, thank everyone for coming. I also want to thank actually the Kite Creates team, the Kite team. There's a lot of work that goes on in the background that makes this happen. And so thank you to you all for stepping in and just pulling this off. So thank you for coming, and you can stay around. The panel are going to be here. We've got to do some photographs first for the AFEC website, and then the story. There'll be a story about this as well. So yes, please hang around. There's a little bit of tea and coffee at the back, but all the goodies are pretty much gone. And chat to this amazing panel that's been brought together today, and I'm sure that let's give them another round of applause.